Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media production. And our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we have Erick Geisler is going to be here. He's a 2-time Emmy winner and post-production expert, and just an all-around good guy. Knows a lot about post-production. So if you, he's really in the thick of a lot of visual effects and nerfs and all kinds of things. It's going to be a great second hour, a great place to ask questions. So stay tuned for the second hour with Erick. And if you've got questions for him, then go ahead and throw those into Makana. If you've got questions for the first hour, you can just go ahead and throw those into Makana as well. Make sure to vote on the questions because that helps us decide which ones to ask first. And if you aren't in Makana, you can still ask questions. You can use the QR code or just go to askofficehours.global. And askofficehours.global is where you want to go if you want to add it to the drop. We usually have a graphic, but it's usually right there. But it's not here today. So anyway, askofficehours.global is where you want to drop that question. Let's go ahead and there it is. See, it just popped right in. See, it just slid in there. So anyway, you can use that QR code if you'd like. By the way, if you haven't checked it out, go back and look at the Saturdays. We're going to take a couple of weeks off because we're not stopping for a couple of weeks, but we're not going to be doing the HDR tests on Saturday because we're moving our kit. But go back and look at Saturday's test if you have an iPhone or something that shows HDR. Pretty impressive. So some of the stuff doesn't work. I look really oversaturated. There's a couple other ones that are a little off as we kind of figure this stuff out. But you're starting to see this really interesting, we're starting to play with it a little bit. So for instance, with this little QR code that you see here, I left the text and the logo itself as white, but I made the background black and the pattern to be gray, and you'll notice it in HDR. Like it's a completely different. It doesn't look nearly the same as it looks here on this show because we're not in HDR on this day. But and then you'll also notice with some. You'll also notice with some of our panelists just lights in the background, and it's funny. Jeffrey's mic holder is nuclear. The white is nuclear. It's like Jeffrey's there, and then there's like this super bright white that's there. I
was wondering about that. Yeah,
but this is why we're doing it on Saturdays, is to see like what works, what doesn't. No one's ever done that. Like Mitch's little lights in the background is on air, just like light up. As does the monitors for John, and so on and so forth. And so the it's worth checking out because we're learning. As we do that. And I think that what's going to be interesting is this back and forth of slowly building some of our backgrounds. I know I'm changing the way my background and my foreground looks based on that feedback. And I find it to be, anyway, it's a really interesting experiment. We hope to be fully in HDR by the beginning of the year. And so you'll see more and more testing as we get closer to the process. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Mitch, what do we have?
Thanks, Alex. First in, Jack Ruppel from Breckenridge, Colorado. Alex often says that live events should be Q&A with content viewed and digested prior to an onstage appearance. Could all my presentation content be played during a countdown period? Q&A starts as soon as the video goes live.
Go ahead, Bill.
I absolutely agree with Alex. I've come to really understand that this is a very powerful training tool or information delivery tool. The one thing, though, is that I think you have to manage expectations. However your show, if you're doing a show, is constructed, to me, the most important thing is consistency, because your audience will start to learn how your show works. If you start with Q&A at the beginning, they need to know that, because people coming to the show for the first time, just wandering in, are going to get none of the presentational aspects of it and just have to understand that we might go to the end of the topic or the middle of the topic as the questions come up on those things, rather than the traditional storytelling format of we'll begin with the beginning, go to the middle, and end into the end. So as long as you train your audience, that's my opinion, as long as you train them as to what to expect, you should be able to do anything. But it does take some training, I think.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think you face the problem of how do you know that they got the message that they were supposed to watch the video before they came to the event? Maybe you could tie the video to the registration. After you view this video, you can unregister. But that's kind of puts a little impedance on signing up. So I think showing the video right at the top as the show is supposed to start. So the video plays and then you go into questions would be good. But I think it would kind of do a disservice to people who just tune into the video and didn't know what the presentation was going to be about, because people like Apple and others do secret announcements. We're going to make a big announcement to make a big splash. And so they're going to announce something new, and they're not going to release a video beforehand because that disrupts their news event of releasing that information all at once. So I'm not sure how you'd handle those kind of situations. Maybe in a classroom situation where, there's required reading or something, you're required to view the video before you show up for class, and then the teacher just does Q&A. That's perfectly acceptable.
Go ahead, Chris.
I think what we're talking about here is tropes. What is the standard way that we all know how to do something? And if we think about what, television was, and I'm going to use past tense, you sit down, you might plop on your couch and rifle through the channels and go, oh, I'm going to watch this. You've probably missed the first couple of minutes, but you don't care that much because it's not that good anyway. And it's there to fill the noise of nothingness in your home. So you have your TV on. But I think that what we are beginning to see is an evolution to a different trope, and that is an informed audience who is seeking out a specific type of entertainment or education. And I think that as people learn that there is a different way of looking at it, I think the idea of knowing that, I should watch this thing before I watch this interview. I mean, people will learn how to do that, whether they do it en masse and whether the bulk of the bell curve of people learn that, maybe not. It's surprising to me how many people still just want that, cable television, turn it on, noise in the room, plop down, I'll watch anything because I just don't have anything else to do. But I think that there is definitely an evolution to a new way of consuming information and entertainment.
Clark Shaughnessy. Do you know who Clark Shaughnessy is? Chris?
No.
He was the coach for the Stanford Indians football team in 1940, and they were known as the Wow Boys. And the reason is Stanford was so bad that they were going to cancel the program. They were so bad. They had not won for seasons. Like they were so bad. And he had this kind of, he had a losing team, I think in Northwestern or something like that. He had this crazy idea of a new T formation with a man in motion, the T formation. And he came out with it, and it confused the defenses so much that that they were running into each other. Like they just couldn't figure it out. And they went undefeated. Not a good team, and then they just kept winning, and then within a decade, pretty much everybody used the same thing. No one was asking for a fix. Like when he came in to do that, there was nothing broken in football. like everybody was just doing what they were doing, and it was working. And we always have to remember that a lot of times everyone's just doing what they're doing because that's the way that it's been done. And they're not looking at the next generation of how that, and something comes out and suddenly everybody does something different, and it's just a matter of it turning that corner. He spent years trying to make this actually work, and it didn't work for a long time. And then suddenly it popped off, and there you go.
Yeah. As it turns out, complacency is a powerful drug.
It is, and as long as everyone stays in their lane, it stays there. But the problem is that what happens when people step out of that lane? And I think that the thing about Q&A specifically and about education, because our education system's about to come unwound. It's just going to become chaotic, and that's usually where there's a lot of opportunity, in this process. And so and it's been complacent. And the problem with complacency is eventually it runs out of steam. You just eventually the world changes so much that whatever was comfortable just doesn't work anymore. And so the issue with, I wouldn't say that you should put it in the pre-show, because I think I agree very much with Courtney in the sense that people won't know. They'll be like, I got here and what happened? And Bill said the same thing. But what we have found where we've done this, and this is in specifically entertainment-based things, product launches are a little different because you want everyone to be on the same queue. Now, Apple doesn't do those live anymore either. I mean, Apple does, Apple just plays you a video live. And so, but they play it all at one time. So everyone gets it at the same time. They can all talk about it at the same time. We can all get together and watch it together. So there's a reason to do it online at the same time. But what I will say is that if you have a bunch of educational things, if you're doing a conference and you put those videos out, and I wouldn't recommend right before the show, I would recommend 2 weeks before the show. Here's what we found when we've done this in the past. 10%, maybe 15% of the people coming to your conference will watch the videos. They're that person. They were good at school. They started their year. They started their semester final, project or whatever on the second day, and they work on it a half an hour a day. There's a group of people that will just do that, right? And they're the studious ones and everything else. So they're the ones that will watch this video ahead of time. Now, what's interesting is, and I don't think you just jump right into the questions. I think you summarize it. You see us do this model here. We don't send you. We're working on getting to a point where we send you videos before the show. Right now, you get 10 minutes, 15 minutes with the person or the expert or the discussion before we open questions. That's how you can you can think about it a little bit as we talk. Like we're setting you up. The mistake people make is they do 45 minutes of talking and then they open it up for 15 minutes. So I'm not saying that you should get rid of it altogether, but what I am saying is that if you summarize it and keep it short and have this other video that kind of sets it up ahead of time, that 10 or 15% of the people will ask all the questions because they had time to look at it, and they're the type of person that will look at it, they'll write things down, they want to know what these things are. And what we found on exits, and this is over the last decade of doing many different shows, is that the retention rate of everybody in the room is the same as if you'd done it all, and generally more for everyone, including the people that didn't watch the video, because the discussion is so driven because people who had watched it have specific questions, and just being in the conversation was enough to get most of the information across. And so the thing is that for the people who didn't watch the video, they still got a lot out of it, and it's because when you're in a Q&A environment, you're in active listening more often. So when the Q&A is there, your mind is in an active listening mode a lot more often than when someone's droning on and giving you bad slides. And so you go into passive mode, and when you go into passive mode, your ability to retain information is about 1/3 of what it is when you're in active mode. And so just keeping you in active mode will have you retain more data. So you want to get the main thing is you just want to look at your presentation as you got to get out of that as fast as you can and get into Q&A. And if you can intermingle it, inside of it. So a lot of times if you go to one of my talks, you'll notice that I open up to questions immediately. But what I do is I talk a little bit, and then people ask questions. I talk about that, and then I talk a little bit more, and we talk. And I just try to intermingle all of it. And by the end, I've covered everything I was going to cover. But I use people's questions to answer that because I know that it'll keep them in an active mode more often. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, the problem with that concept is these days, everybody in the audience, or at least 90% of everyone in the audience, has a little thing in their pocket that has access to the internet. And those that haven't seen the video are going to want to go and look at the video while you're in the middle of your Q&A. So you've lost attention of half the audience that hadn't seen the video. So their retention of the Q&A information is going to be zero because they're watching the video.
That hasn't been our experience at all.
I think you have to show the video first and then ask.
Again, we do an intro where we cover most of the information there. We don't even talk about the video. Like when we do the videos, we get on and we just act like there was nothing there, and we just give a 10-minute presentation or a 10-minute talk before we open it up to questions. So if you didn't watch the video, you won't know that you were missing anything. It's just that there's a lot of people with a lot of really smart questions that are in the audience. And so because we don't want you to feel like you're missing anything. So we don't do that. Sorry, I spilled something. That's why I'm looking a little distracted.
I think I do things like in the middle of conversations here, we'll say discuss this certain topic, and I'll be not up on that topic. So I'll look up that product that you're talking about and look at the specifications on it to figure out what kind of questions I want to ask. But while I'm doing that, I'm disconnected from the questions that are being asked while I'm doing that.
But you're actively exploring the idea. And you're looking up things. It just
and missing
again,
half of the discussion. Yeah. Right.
no, we just haven't found that to be the case. I mean, I know that that's the theoretical idea of what would happen. It's just not been what we've seen on the ground for a decade of doing it, and for my case, 2 decades of doing it. And so, because I base a lot of my talks on things that I've already built videos about. So so things that are, it's usually if you're in a conversation, people are asking questions, people just pay a lot of attention to it. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I think when you're working with a community of common interest, I think this works incredibly well. I mean, we're all here because we all want to learn about technology. We all want to share information about technology. Everybody's really going into the same space for the same general ideas. The one place I don't think that this system works as well is in competitive worlds. And I guess I'm thinking back on things like the Final Cut launch where they introduced it, but then there was this fallow period of a couple of months before the actual product shipped. And in the middle of that, you could almost see parties trying to shape the information space about this thing is terrible and it'll never work and it doesn't do this right. And the whole conversation was dominated by people trying to tell you it was a bad idea. And then when it finally came out, that had led to huge amounts of confusion. And so I think if there's a competitive product in a space, I would keep the time between seeding the idea out there and getting it in to starting the Q&A discussion as short as possible, because if not, you're going to find forces at work trying to move the market.
Well, there's 2 things there, and then we'll move on. But you're right. But the main thing is that for a product launch, I would say that you do a product launch and then you do a Q&A session with press, and a lot of companies already do this, right? So there's a lot of Q&A sessions that happen after the product launch with the press, whether that's live that day or for the next couple of weeks. A lot of these large companies may or may not have semi-secret places in New York and LA and others where they invite press to come in and take a look at the products. I don't know all of them, but I can tell you some of them are really nice. so anyway, so so they show off the products there. But they also, I do think that, and I think Apple does this probably better than most, and I think they've learned over time, is that there's a whole bunch of videos that go out that get people excited about things. That Apple doesn't just produce the videos. They have a launch, but then there's video after video after video after video that comes out afterwards to keep the conversation going in the right direction. They also work very closely with Marques Brownlee and Justine, Ezerick and a lot of others to, kind of keep that all moving in the right direction. So you're right that you have to pay attention to those things. And I think launches are a little different. But what I would say is that what we're talking about is 95% of it or 99% of what goes out are conferences. And you're talking about things that people want to learn about. And you give them the best opportunity to learn by giving them the videos ahead of time and letting them percolate. And you can decide whether you want to talk about that a little bit during the session. But the real value of having everybody in a live session together is to talk about it, is to discuss it and to have it in a conversation, not to spend a lot of time droning on about it and generally showing really bad slides. I would like to say that I have a moratorium. I probably haven't put a bullet point in my slide deck for 5 years. I don't use bullet points. I find another way to display the information, but I will never use a bullet point because it's just not. It turns people. I can see them. I used to be able to see them while I was talking, look down at their phones. As soon as bullet points started coming up, they'd look down, and I just learned not to put them in. I'll put 3 ideas next to each other or 4 ideas next to each other in like little panels that spin across or something, doing the same thing, but not a bullet point. Go ahead, Mitch.
The first thing you should do before you go into a session or once you've gotten into the session is check under your seat because there might be something there for you.
Okay. Next question.
Might be gum. David Brady from New York, asking, MIT Technology Review artists now have a tool called Nightshade. It poisons AI learning models. Now, how will this impact other data sets, and will this undermine all the good that AI has to offer?
Go ahead, John.
David, resistance is futile. There's a thing called reinforcement learning human feedback. So they have warehouses full of people that are saying cat, dog, house. And so I think this is a clickbait article. They've already said there's ways that the artists can opt out of the models. So I think this is clickbait.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well, as the token Luddite, somebody has to explain to me how it can poison anything.
It's telling you that it's something different than what it is. Like because a lot of this AI depends on metadata. So if you start scrambling the metadata, it makes it hard for it to understand. But I think that if this had come out earlier, it could have been really problematic if it was widespread and early. But it's too late now because it has error controls already built in. Like it already knows. Like if you tell it it's not a dog, it's like, okay, I know it's not a dog, but now I'm just going to ignore you. Like I've decided that your data set, and sure, if artists don't want to have people ignore it, but they can just. Most of these companies are giving them the ability to tag their pages, so that there's no reason to poison the AI because they can just tag their pages. Don't use this page for AI. The AI has what it needs. It doesn't need them every page now. Like it just doesn't like it. It doesn't need everybody to play along. If 80% are playing along, it'll be just fine. And so you can just tag it off at this point. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, isn't it easy to forget that the AI is only as good as the information it's already in there that we
it's already
in there? Okay.
But it's in there without the poison. It's already crawled most of the internet, and so it's already has that information. The new information, what they're now saying is, well, if you want to turn it off, it's fine. It's just that you won't be as, you just won't be as seen by it. That's fine because most people aren't going to turn it off. Most people aren't going to even think about it. Like they're not going to, so I just don't think it's not going to matter. Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Well, so basically what this is there was a company out of Chicago called Glaze, and they created this thing called Web Glaze, which actually puts, it's not like it's adding a pixel. It's not like magic art or anything like that, but it's got the same properties as if you had if you were trying to take a picture of the latest Mazda or BMW, and they had like all the camouflage on top of it, except you can't see the camouflage. And no matter what you do, if you turn, if you stretch, if you unstretch, it's actually doing a very good job in keeping the properties so somebody can't copy it. You're absolutely right that if this art was online before AI started, then it's a good chance that it's just been cataloged and gone from there. But anything that's after that, any artist, and it's a closed thing, so you have to be an artist to actually use WebGlaze, but you can download the WebGlaze application to try it. And then, like I said, it just changes some slight pixels, which and we're talking discoloration that actually make this picture think that it's another picture.
Yeah, We'll see. I just think it's too late. Like that dog is out of the gate.
Not to new pictures.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, but the model can compare it to new pictures. They can also just discard the metadata from anything that they scrape, and start over and let it classify it based on what it analyzes. So, and then have humans and then cross-check it. Steganography has been used for years, which is where you're embedding secret information into a piece of visual data. And you can do that, and I think that's a better way to control copyright control and metadata is to settle on a steganographic. That's a tough one. Or a steganographic method of embedding copyright information into an image invisibly. The problem having a decoder. Sorry about the flash. And having a decoder. Automatically decode it and discard those that have that steganographic mark on it. And it doesn't then it wouldn't really affect the quality of the artwork or the image depicted,
And again, I think that what will happen is all these systems will just learn what to ignore. Like they're not going to get fooled. It's just going to see it come up and just go, okay, ignore that photo. And so it's not like it's going to take it off to some other direction. And again, that system, they're just going to ignore those images. And maybe if everybody did it long enough, it would slow down the process, but it's only slowing it down. I mean, I think we really have to figure out how we're going to use AI in what we're doing. The idea of stopping it is that is over. There's not any way to do that, and I think that, and when we look at any technology as it gets out of the gate, I mean, we figured out how to manage nuclear power, but there was no putting it back in. As soon as it went off, as soon as it went off in New Mexico, it was going to happen. And there was nothing that anyone was ever going to do to stop it. And so when technology comes out of the gate like that, you have to figure out how you're going to manage that, because it's not going to be able to, this is not something you can put back in the bottle. Next question.
From Jack Rupel in Breckenridge, Colorado. Yesterday, I asked about my already bricked YI M1 camera, also pronounced E camera, by rooting. Can I figure out if this a hardware problem or a firmware OS problem, and how? Who can help? Sources of info.
So you already bricked your Android camera, and oh boy. I don't know if you bricked it or whether it bricked itself. I mean, I guess the question for you, Jack, is this something that you did brick in the process of you trying to update it, or are you trying to recover it? Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I tried to find some places that you could go. I looked at some Reddit spots that talked to cameras specifically, and not too many talked about this camera. There's got to be some user group out there, because this was a popular camera back then. But the only other thing I can think of is you can contact the company and see if there's anything that you can do if you're not looking for paid support, anything that you can do that's not paid.
Next question.
Next one in from Douglas Carmichael. One of the reasons why Reddit has aggressively monetized its API was to capitalize on the large language model makers' need for training data. Could you see news organizations themselves deploying their own LLMs trained on their own archives?
Go ahead, John.
100% is happening as we speak. So if you have a corpus of more than 100,000 words, you get one of the foundation models like Llama 2, and then you train it with your existing data on top of it. It's happening as we speak.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Is it possible that different news organizations could put out their own LLMs, some more powerful than others, and they could battle for continuity of data?
The battle of the
my
LLMs.
LLM's bigger than yours.
It would be. It'd be interesting to see. It depends on how they're going to actually use it. Quick reminder, of course, you can ask questions throughout the hour. If you can throw those into Makana right now and vote on those questions, because that helps us figure out which question to ask next. So make sure to vote if you're inside of Makana. If you're not inside of Makana, you can use just this QR code, or just go to askofficehours.global. You can do that 24/7. So if you think of a question, a lot of the questions that are coming in from these QR codes are coming in throughout the night, throughout the afternoon, and then we file them in during it. So if you've got an idea somewhere in the day, the easiest place to put it is askofficehours.global. Next question.
Funsak Dorji for Dharamsala, India. Hi, panelists. During this live stream, my A10 Mini Extreme just froze. Record and stream buttons got switched off. I tried pressing the on switch, but to no avail. What could have gone wrong?
Go ahead, Bill.
So sometimes my A10 Mini has just lost its brain for some reason. It doesn't happen very often. It's mostly been a very dependable device. But when that happens, I've found myself in this circumstance where no matter what you do to the unit itself, it's not going to reboot successfully without a complete shutdown. So I've actually wired my A10 Mini through a switch on my dashboard here. And if it locks up, I literally power it down. Now, if you're in a live show, because he says during a live stream, it is problematic because some of the infrastructure connections that you have will go away if you take it offline. So you have to use it judiciously. But if there's no way to bring it back and you have to do that, my suggestion, if you're a full-time streamer, is to have an alternative feed system so that you can get something around a component that you have to shut down so you don't mess everything up. But it's a problem, and sometimes I have had to completely reboot the whole thing from scratch.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, Bill is exactly right. And unfortunately, Blackmagic Design does not like putting on-off switches on things, so you have to do it yourself. And the power switch is a screw-on terminal thing. It's just not something you could do easily. A while back, Tom Ferguson showed us a inline wired rocker switch, basically, that allows you to do a quick power cycle, and it only takes about 5 seconds to bring it back alive. But that's a great device. I'd show it to you, but I would knock my picture off.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, it could be you got a gamma ray hit. A lot of things can go wrong. Contamination of the USB bus, USB buffer overflow, etc. Weird things happen to my video signal about every 15 minutes, as you see. But another thing to keep in mind is it could be overheating. If you haven't, that extreme, the mini extreme has a lot of LED backlights lighting up all those little buttons. So go into the settings and drop it down to 40% or 50%. You'll still be able to see all the buttons just fine. And it reduces the amount of heat that's generated inside there considerably. So make sure that your button brightness is not turned up all the way, because it could be heat that's causing a problem as well.
Yeah, and I turn the buttons all the way as low as they will go. Because it's just there's you can see them just fine without that. And I don't know if it really affects the stability of it. It stays, mine doesn't get very hot. I think the number one thing that generates heat on this is the actual LED buttons. So I do agree with Courtney that it could be a heat issue. One thing to do right before a show, so right as you're getting ready to start, it's part of kind of my startup process, is that I will go in and say, save startup state. So I just, like, I'm about to go and I save my startup state for my ATEM. And what that means is that if I have to restart the ATEM, it's going to come right back into the same settings that it was right there. And that's something that is, a lot of times we don't do that. And then you end up unplugging the ATEM and plugging it back in. Like, for instance, inside of Zoom, we occasionally get this gray screen, which we think is Blackmagic's fault. Anyway, so there's a gray screen that you get every once in a while with Zoom. And so before I unplug the switcher, all you have to do is unplug the switcher and plug it back in. It'll come right back up again. But I go up and I save my startup state. Then I open it and close it. That way it comes back up exactly with all my images where they were. Everything's all set the way it was. I'm not losing anything. So just always remember that startup state is an important piece, and it's right under your file in your ATEM software. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, what a bummer. I mean, this is where having alternative pieces of hardware down the chain can save you. I try not to put too much load on one thing, and I don't want to really disparage Blackmagic products, but some of the people in the chat will for me. I just wouldn't put that much of a load on it. I've heard just people not having good luck with the web cache filling up and things like that. So I would recommend either a web presenter or something else. An AJ, Helio, Teradek has some good encoders. There's a lot of them out there. Right now, I like the Osprey Talon. That thing's been just rock solid. So it depends on your show. If you have the budget to get a better encoder, there's other encoders out there. But especially if you're going to YouTube, take advantage of the primary and backup stream. So that way, if one fails, you can at least, and a router or something, so that signal can still go through. So that way, to your secondary encoder, you have the signal, so you can get completely locked up and have a time to restart. If you lose your recordings, I mean, that's rough. But I've seen it happen multiple times. Sometimes it's T7 drives. So really qualify this stuff for the show. Try to run this stuff for 24 hours and just bake it in. There is an ATEM Extreme stand that you can get that'll give you better airflow. He could be a culprit, and then just the internet cache filling up. Those are the two things that I've seen, and then the bad drives.
Next question.
Next one coming in from Michael Smith in Silverado, California. Any panelists to see the Adobe Fast Fill project demo?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I watched it live. I was very excited. I showed it to Chris. He said, yeah, technology, it's never going to happen.
Hey, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. The most amazing part, it kind of covered the generative fill we've seen in Photoshop that they've released in the beta, but they showed some new stuff that we hadn't seen before. That they showed a guy without a tie, and it was video, and they then brought in a tie to him. I won't show the video so we don't get taken down. But as the video plays, that tie that it added to his shirt there moves with him as he moves, and the lighting changes on it, which is what's really amazing, that it actually copies the surrounding lighting and affects the pixels of the generative tie in there, and it doesn't get all swimmy like it does with Stable Diffusion or any of the other generative AI video things right now. So they've conquered that issue. So they generate one model, and apparently as a 3D model, and then tie it to the moving pixels in the video. That was really amazing.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I like it a lot. The tie example, he has two colors in there, so that was not the best example for them. But when it comes to taking out small things in the background, it makes perfect sense when you start to get into the foreground stuff, or you start to get to the like faces or anything like that. And that's always the problem I've always had with generative fill, is they try to put more people into the shot, and it's like, I don't want those people in the shot. I want to keep it. I want you to have something a little bit more than that. So I have a feeling it's far from out. I don't think they have any release date set as of yet, but from what I've seen for simple edits, simple fixes, it looks really nice. And I know that there's a lot of apps out there now that do the same thing. And Google's Pixel also has removal options. But I don't know if you can choose, I don't want people there, I want a whale there, or anything like that.
I had a client, I had a 16:9 image that I needed to make, and the client gave me a wide shot, widescreen, 235 instead of 16:9. And I just needed to extend it out. And it's truly amazing. Like, I just selected it with a couple pixels overlap and just said, extend, and grabbed the bottom one and say extend. You could not tell. like it just extended it perfectly. And just kind of, to me, it's not the how do we make a new movie with AI, or how do we replace actors with AI. It's just this constant, like, I just need to fix one little thing. I just need to move this over. I need to remove, get this out of the way, extend this out. It's amazing. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I think one of the funnest one I saw was somebody took the album cover to Thriller. Remember Michael Jackson kind of laying there? And they just kept going out and out and out and out, and let the AI interpret what the rest of the photo would have been. And in this particular example, he was laying down, getting a pedicure, and there was cameras around him. It was ridiculous. It was quite fun.
I got to see that. You got to do that with Sergeant Pepper. I'd like to see what it's.
There's a little hyperbaric chamber off to the side. Yeah, it's great.
It's good. It's very good. Next question.
Next one coming in from Roscoe Jones in Provincetown, Massachusetts. What do you think of this video tutorial on the basics of switchers?
Yeah, I scanned through this. I saw this last night, and it looks pretty good. It looks like a pretty good. It could have gone a little faster, I think, but it wasn't that long. I think it's like a 10-minute video. And then I went in and found a whole bunch of other ones. That's what happens with me, is I get into photo, and then I saved them all. So I'm going to sit down and watch a whole bunch of them, just how people describe switchers. But I thought it wasn't bad. I would check it out. There's a link there. It's always good to look at these to see how other people describe what that looks like. And I would check it out. Next question.
From West Decker in Fort Worth, Texas. I'm a photogrammetry hobbyist using Apple's Reality Composer and Reality Composer Pro. Like to invest a little more, $500 to $1,000, to get better results scanning items that are 2x2x2. Any ideas for lighting, tripod rigs for the iPhone, etc.?
And this came in from the QR code. So a couple things that you want to think about there. And I'm experimenting with a little of it right now, but one of the things is a turntable. So think about having a turntable that you can put things on and turn them. I believe that the new Reality Composer, there's other software that I use that you can use the turntable and then use that and still get it'll know that you were turning it. So it just keeps on realigning that. And especially what you have to do is mask that out. And I'm using Metashape to do that. So it's a little bit different than your standard one. But I'm working on with Apple's Reality Composer is to do that with Reality Composer with a turntable. So you put your object on the turntable. That way you can keep your camera where it needs to be. And then you simply turn it around as it goes. I believe because of the way that Apple's showing, I haven't been as successful at it yet with the Composer of being able to kind of flip objects around, but Apple's software seems to understand that it's asking you to flip something and then you flip it. So a lot of this stuff seems to be where it needs to go, and I just haven't had enough time to really dig into it as deeply as I'd like to. But the turntable is important, big soft lighting. So for 2x2, you can get these soft boxes that have lights that are kind of on the outside of them, and then build that out so you have kind of a nice soft lighting for the object. And you only have to do that from one angle if you do this turntable process, so you don't have to go around it. Now, one thing that I'm still surprised hasn't happened, we had somebody who's watching the show that started to go down this path, but I think it got too complicated. But I think that one thing that I'm kind of missing is the ability to have multiple cameras, multiple iPhones, be able to be connected together because, and be able to just say fire, what you want to do is you want to time the turntable with the firing of, let's say, 3 iPhones at one time. So you can just hit, and it just goes click, 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 click. As it goes around, it just fires all of them at the same time. And then accumulate, pulls those photos back and processes them. It'd be a lot faster. As a hobbyist, it's not that big of a deal right now. But when you start thinking, I want to have all the objects in my store built into a 3D object, and you have someone you're paying $20 an hour in the back doing it, you want to start thinking about mass production. And usually that means more cameras at more angles. That's how you kind of speed things up again. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you could do, and there's a lot of things on Amazon and eBay about for eBay photographers that are these kind of little photo studio setups that are 2x2. This one's 32 inches by 32 inches and has built-in lighting, etc. You could put your turntable at the bottom of that and put your camera on a tripod out in front and program it to take pictures. This one has 3 customizable LED panels, etc., to even light and different backgrounds, etc. So there's a lot of things like that are set up for the people that want to, put stuff on eBay and photograph it, and just take something like that that will keep even lighting and rotate your object in front to do your photogrammetry.
Good. Next question.
Next question for Jack Ruppel in Breckenridge, Colorado. I ran across an old video of my wife on local TV discussing Bear Aware for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. All of the advertisers are now out of business, all of them. Discuss, please. Grandfather's World, Grandfather's Tech, Grandfather's Tropes.
Go ahead, Chris.
Am I the only one who read this as beer aware? I thought this was going a totally different direction. I'm sorry, Jack.
Good. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yes, a whole bunch of beer commercials. So that's my recommendation to you is if you can digitize those commercials, there are a whole bunch of YouTubers, if it's really good quality, that are looking for stuff like that so they can make compilations of old commercials, old advertisers, and put that on. So that would be, if you want to do it. Other than that, just enjoy the moment, and it's always great to actually see videos of you and family members from years ago.
Next question.
Next one in from Matt Cool in Montreal, California. Canada, sorry. Are you covering NAB from New York City this week?
We will have some folks in after hours doing it. We don't have as much of a formal schedule as we were. We had some funding issues that made it hard for us to kind of manage that. So we are realigning for NAB Las Vegas, but I think we will have some people jumping in from there into after hours. So stay tuned probably for some informal announcements. Next question.
And we have another question coming in on our QR code. It's from Jordi Varshbotnik, of Swissvale. Jeffrey, did you make a decision on what to do with the gear you were asking about? And did you make a nice donation to a nice charity? Or is it the final outcome still pending?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So thanks for the question there, Jordi. So basically what it is, I had a ATEM 4K production studio, which I don't use anymore. It's been sitting. I used it back in 2016. Bought it, and yeah, actually I did sell it on eBay, and it's going to a guy who actually builds fly kits using the production switchers. So it's got a good home. I knew it still had value to somebody, and normally, as for donating stuff, my thing is, if I buy it, I'm going to try and sell it. If I do sell it, I have a hard time selling anything. But if it was something that I was given as a review model or anything like that, I would have given it away as well. But I want to thank everybody who did call out and ask what the status is going to be, because I know there was a few people that would have loved to see that in their productions for their churches or whatever. So, but yeah, I had to make a few dollars on it because I've got a pending move myself that I have to do.
Go ahead, John.
Jeffrey turned down my offer of 1,000 Dogecoin.
I shouldn't have. Everything's starting to come back up. So,
next question.
I have a question, and it is Western Digital has a class action suit that claims that some units randomly erase all the data. How can that be?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, it could be it doesn't erase all the data. It just loses access to the data if the head falls off or it messes up the file allocation table. This was against their red drives, which were their NAS drives. The lawsuit has settled, so if you weren't involved, December 31st was the last time, I think, to claim your money of last year. So you're out of luck if you're trying to get in on it now. So it was against a specific type of drive used, a red drive used for NASs with Western Digital. It was a class action suit against Western Digital that was settled.
Next question.
Michael Marsh from San Anselmo asking, archiving old floppy disks on a Mac. Reader only recognizes MS-DOS format. Modern Mac OS can't read legacy Mac format. Is there software that can read these disks?
Go ahead, Bill.
There might be, but the software-hardware nexus of things, particularly before OS X came in, because that was pretty much a ground floor rewrite of the entire operating system. So I think your best bet is to have somebody with an old computer that is pre that transition era who has all the routines in that old computer to read these. I think this might be a case where you probably have the best results going to one of the archive recovery places who maintain old machines and old operating systems that speak the language of those old things. Floppy disks, those 3.5 inches on Macs are pretty robust, and the data is probably still there unless they've been stored really badly. So fingers crossed, but I would go to a pro for this.
Good, Jeffrey.
You can put Linux on it. If there was a way that you can read disks, but I think it's NTFS. That now I'm really thinking about it. There's commands you can run to actually make that come up. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, if you've got an older Mac, you can try something like VMware Fusion, or try to do the dual boot to a Windows unit. But other than that, just find a Windows machine and try and copy them from there.
Go ahead, Chris.
I find this amazing and shocking and very un-Apple. I did not realize that there was such a change in the OS that it couldn't read an old disk. And I got to say, Courtney, this is your best I hate Apple ammo ever.
It was the transition between the Unix system and the system
between OS 7 and OS 9 and OS 10. It was OS 9 and OS 10.
Yeah, it was when they moved to Unix that they changed the entire file architecture. So it's
Courtney, I give you permission to use this against me forever.
Courtney, real quick.
Yeah, I used to use a thing called Mac Disk. It may still be available. I don't know if it runs on a modern version of Windows, but it runs on a Windows machine that reads those HFS floppies, which is how they used to format the floppy disks on the Macintoshes before OS X. So you might see if Mac Disk version 8 is still available and run it on an old Windows machine, and you can then get that data off of those old Mac disks.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael here with a question. There are strong rumors that we're going to see an Apple Mac announcement next week. What do you think? We'll see.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Something with an M3, I think.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, there's rumors about the iMac line getting an update into the M3 realm. Nothing. Usually it's where iPads start to get, or the lower-end iPads start to get their updates, but I haven't heard anything about that yet.
Next question.
Daniel Patridge from Rochester, Minnesota. The other day I mentioned the on-demand HDR feed for Weekend and Q&A was washed out colors on Firefox on the Mac. Just found out by accident that the colors return normal if you go full screen in Firefox. Strange but good, I guess.
Yeah, so what's happening there most likely is that Firefox is managing the color when it's not full screen, and then it's handing it off to Apple to handle it when you go into full screen. So it's changing mode and it's giving it back to Apple. Apple can support HDR. What that means is that Firefox is doing something where it's trying to manage all that color in its own inside of its own browser. And you'll notice this in a couple different places where frame rate might get better. A lot of other things get better when you go full screen, but oftentimes the Apple will turn off everything, all the other screens, and it kind of goes into a different mode, but they're handing that video off to the OS to make that playback, and that will fix it. It should work fine inside of Chrome and Safari. Firefox is a little behind in their support of HDR. So anyway, but I think that's what you're seeing there. Next question.
Michael Tan from San Diego, California. For office hours, isn't there a search engine that when you search something like ATEM, all the questions related to ATEM will show from general questions?
Go ahead, Guy.
So it's not super up to date, but if you go to the site Filmot, and then you can pump in the term and the channel, and it'll bring up every time that word was, and this is scraped off the metadata and the subtitles that are automatically generated in YouTube. And you can do this with any channel. And you can see here that, like in this one, focus on behind the scenes ruthless. If we hit that, we can jump right to that video at that point in time when the word ATEM is mentioned. So on any of these videos. So that's one way. I don't know of any other way, but this is one way. And again, the data is not up to date, like as of yesterday or something like that. It's a couple months old, but that's one way of going out about finding old content.
Next question.
Eduardo Augustine from Panama City, Panama. Has anyone seen the new Elgato prompter? It seems to be limited to only a computer. What are your thoughts on this product? Is it worth it?
Go ahead, John.
Jonas Tatel has one. He's going to be on the show on Friday, and he's got it connected. He really likes it, but he'll be on Friday.
Go ahead, Bill.
I'm coming around to the idea. I think it's a positive thing, a simple thing that takes all the processing load off of your computer and essentially puts it in the teleprompter. Probably be useful for a lot of people if you don't have brand new equipment and a lot of power.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
For a small teleprompter, I think that it's all in the mounting capability, and they seem to kind of push you towards buying their Elgato camera. I like the idea that the home stream, my iCan, for example, fits on the front of the lens like a matte box, and I think that's the best way to mount a small teleprompter.
Yeah, they do have other way. You know, they built a lot of other solutions so you can put pretty much any camera back there. I mean, obviously their own webcam pops right in, but they have SLR, and if you look a little lower, they have those additions there. I will be interested to see if it's only a computer direct connection, because if it's not, it is I can't use it because I have a whole HDMI subsystem. Courtney, I know you want to say something. I had locked the question. Go ahead.
Yeah, it is USB-C is the only wire that comes out of that monitor, and it connects in, and it requires the DisplayPort drivers, so it sets up a virtual video card in your PC. So it does, Bill, it does put a lot of more strain on your computer because it's got to process all that video for that external monitor out there as a virtual video card.
I think I was swirling around it until I saw that I suddenly realized, I'm not going to be able to connect an HDMI to it or any version of HDMI. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, well, that's that for me. Like, I think it could be useful for other people, but I need it. It has to be. I have so many subsystems. I can't have a teleprompter that I can't just route to. Next question.
Chester Sweeney with a QR code question. He's from Las Vegas, Nevada. I've been trying original ways or places to record, and I was wondering, has anyone ever recorded a band or singer inside an igloo?
I don't know, but I, the idea of recording inside of an igloo in Las Vegas just kind of breaks my mind. I don't even know what to do there. It's really hot in Vegas. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
The weird thing about this is that igloos are basically a parabola, which means that you're going to get weird reflections kind of focused on one spot. I don't know, one of our audio guys from our Wednesday shows would probably be better to talk about this, but I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. You may get something like a parabolic microphone effect happening as things bounce off the dome shape of the igloo and hit one spot.
Unless it was soft enough. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah.
I don't shoot in an igloo, build an igloo set.
Yeah.
It's a neat look, but don't. I know. No.
Let's try it. I go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, shooting it inside any domed structure is going to be problematic. They have this problem now with these virtual sets with curved LED walls. On Mandalorian, they had a big problem getting the sound because there's focal points where somebody could say something way over in the corner there, and if the mic's at the focal point, it'll pick up those people that are off camera just muttering to each other. So very big problem with focusing sound reflecting off a smooth surface.
Go, Jeffrey.
Plus you have the vibration, which could cause the whole structure to go crumbling down. So yeah, probably not a good idea to build the set.
They're pretty stable structures if you build them traditionally. Next question.
Tim Holm from San Lorenzo asking, I often notice that on network news, while the anchors are listening to the guest or in general, they have dead eyes. What are some techniques to allow you to look more engaged with the other party online? That's the QR code question, by the way.
Go ahead, Bill.
Having had some news training in college and the rest of that, one of the roles of a host is to maintain neutrality. You're not supposed to be nodding at some points and looking confused at other points. And I think, at least in the training that I had when I was young about news, you were supposed to be the neutral observer. You weren't supposed to react positively or negatively no matter what was being said, because that's not your job. That's the audience's job to do that. Now, we've gone away from that in the modern news thing, and there are certainly newsatorial channels that are there to commentate on whether they think an idea is good or bad when everybody says something. But that wasn't the origin of news training. It used to be your goal is to be the neutral observer.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, we're just complicated biological computers, and when our buffers begin to overload, our eyes kind of glaze over as we're trying to process too many bits of data coming from different directions. And when somebody's talking in your ear while you're talking or listening to somebody that you're interviewing, it's tough to maintain your thought. You have to sort of segment or compartmentalize what's going on, one part of your brain or the other, and that's a tough thing to learn to do.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, after the question is asked is when the producer is going to get in the ear of the interviewer and say, take them in a different direction or giving them instructions. So they may be trying to process information other than what the rest of the world is listening to. Or they may be looking at the teleprompter, which shows, bullet points of the next question coming up. So they're preparing their next question while the person is answering the first question. So they do look distracted rather than paying attention a lot of times to the answer that the person they're interviewing is giving.
Yeah, the number one reason that they look dead-eyed and the reason that their panelists look dead-eyed is because they don't have teleprompters. And so they don't have Interrotron setups. So they're not looking at the person. So when you look at them they're looking in the direction of the camera and nodding. And in general, that's actually what's happening for even the folks that are coming in remotely. So if you're looking at a CNN thing and there's people coming in from Chicago or whatever, they're not looking at a teleprompter the way we oftentimes look at the teleprompter here, because a lot of us have a teleprompter setup. That's too expensive to do the return feed. And so they get a teleprompter they're looking at. And as a result, their eyes, so the dead eyes that you're talking about is the result of not, the eyes are not, they're not coming to the lens. So they're looking at a direction, but they're not constrained. They're not coming into the lens. Our eyes actually converge just a little when we look at other people. And we see that. We've noticed this when we do Interrotron, is we notice people's eyes converge in a way that doesn't happen when they're just looking at a camera. And that has a different feel to it. And so I think that's probably what you're feeling, is they're just looking straight. They're looking at a camera, not directly into the camera, because they don't see anybody over there. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking, the Twitch simulcasting guidelines bans tools that combine activity from other platforms like merging chat and present it to the user. Could this be a blow to multi-streaming tools like Restream?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Not really. It's actually been, they've done this for the last few months. When I use Restream, they just basically say you can't watch the chat. It's nice because before I had like 4 or 5 chats open, and you just got to open up the open up the Twitch chat, and if you don't want it, you just don't put it in there. Simple as that.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you one of the problems, of course, is that they could turn off the API. And other companies and others might turn off the API. You also get penalized sometimes when you ask for people to ask questions somewhere else and you put the link into Twitter or X or YouTube or other things. YouTube's own chat system is so painful to use as an API that only a few can do it. Now, there is one way to get around this, because they can manage the metadata, but they don't really look at the video image. So if you put up, let's say, a QR code, cue the QR code. If you put up a QR code and ask for the questions, they don't have any way to search for that yet. So anyway, putting a QR code in a video and asking for questions allows you to merge those questions without using their API. I wonder who would ever do such a thing. Oh, wait, we would. So anyway, now you understand a little bit more about why the QR code and the link that we're putting in for the Q&A is coming forward, is because it allows us to basically work around all those issues. So anyway, we've got Erick Geisler here in just a minute. A quick reminder that tomorrow we're going to talk about how to choose a mixer. So how to choose an audio mixer. There's analog mixers and big mixers and little mixers and field mixers. And we're going to talk about how we make that decision and which ones make sense for which things. On Thursday, we have Color Lab AI. So Dado Valentic is going to be here, and he's the chief scientist there at Color Lab, and he's going to be here talking about what Color Lab does. It does basically some automatic grading that you can then adjust and kind of let you match shots and pull things together and give them looks. And so it looks really, really interesting, and it'll be great to have Dado here on Thursday. On Friday, we are going to have the Zoom team back. So the broadcast team from Zoom, that's Andy Carluccio, Jonathan Cocotella, and Sam Kokaiko, will all be here, and they will be talking about what it took to put on Zoomtopia, that great wall that was back there. They were using Unreal Engine and a lot of other things there, and they're going to break down exactly how they did that. So stay tuned for that later in the week, and let's go ahead and jump into the second hour. Welcome back to the second hour, and it's really, really good to have Erick Geisler here. Hey, Erick, can you hear us okay?
Oh, I can hear you great.
Excellent. And Erick he's a two-time Emmy winner and really an authority in post-production. And he's an award-winning creative director, producer for 5 Primetime Television Emmy award nominations and over 25 years of working in computer animation, visual effects in film and television. And Erick and I have known each other off and on for 30 years. Is that close?
That's very close. It's very close.
Yeah, exactly. So we were having lunch the other day, and we just realized like how long it had gone back, and we were at there was the infamous Electric Image
user
group. There was a user group in was it Santa Monica? Is that right?
It was. Yeah. Well, actually, there was one at the Beverly Hills Hotel.
Yeah,
where I think we first met, and then it was regularly in Santa Monica.
Yeah, and so we talk about the John Knoll shot. There was a John Knoll shot from Mission Impossible that he showed that literally changed the entire visual effects industry. like John just kind of casually showed us how he did rendering in layers, and no one had thought of that. So tell us a little bit from that point on, Erick. Give us a little bit of your background or what your path's been over the last 25 years.
Oh, sure. I mean, I kind of fell into visual effects and post-production by accident, honestly. When I started, I came to Los Angeles from Michigan. I was originally from Michigan, and my parents moved around a little bit, ended up in Texas, and then finally in 1980, we came to Los Angeles. And I was going to school, and some of my friends were acting, and so I sort of was dabbling in acting and did some, a little bit of acting here and there on old TV shows and sitcoms and stuff. And I was really bored, sitting around waiting. As an actor, you literally wait for everything. And I would just walk up to
the set moves so much slower than everyone thinks. It's
so slow.
it's just a lot of boredom's punctuated by terror and then back to boredom. Yeah.
That's right. And so, but I would be fascinated with what was happening behind the camera and all the technicians and craftsmen and artisans and all of the stuff that's happening. So I would hang out and start talking to them, and that's what sort of got me, the bug of filmmaking bit me at that point. And then, at that point, there was 2 parts that I really loved: art, and illustration and design. And I had been working for a friend of my parents, was a rep for illustrators. And they got me like an internship with an illustrator guy by the name of Joe Spencer. He was an airbrush artist, very, prolific airbrush artist. He worked with, a bunch of other these, illustrators at the time. They suggested that I go to Art Center in Pasadena. I went to Art Center, got accepted, and started going to school at a very expensive, very terrifying school. Art Center is like, incredibly competitive, right? And I didn't really, I thought I'm a good artist, right? I'm this and that. And you get to the school, and it's like, I liken it to being, you think you're really good, a good ball player in high school, and then you get to college and you have to play college ball, and you're like, oh, wow, I really thought I was good, but now I'm sitting next to like the future ball players of the NBA. And so Art Center was really competitive. It was really tough. And I was really questioning whether that was the right choice. But at that time, they had just gotten this grant and had gotten a ton of computer graphics equipment, and their computer lab was fledgling.
What year was this? What year was that?
This was like 86.
Yeah.
87. And they just got, like, SGI had just donated like a ton of equipment. And so I went into the computer lab one night, and I met this guy. His name was Sandeep Shakur, and he was explaining to me like Wavefront, right? And how Wavefront worked. And I was just mesmerized. And that's sort of like got me very, very interested in the industry. But I was also, working as an illustrator with this gentleman, Joe Spencer, and he, I would do a lot of prep work for him. You would cut these masks with friskets with like blades and stuff, and then I started doing darkroom work. So I was a darkroom tech. One of my early jobs, I worked for a company called Wallen Green Design. They did a lot of movie posters and stand-ups and standees and stuff. And so there's a technical background to darkroom work where you're using all these complicated cameras. We're making like photostats and stuff. And so you're learning cameras, you're learning technology, and art. And then I started learning a bit about computer graphics, and it all sort of started to sort of coalesce and come together.
I do feel like there's something lost when you don't do the analog part. Like, a lot of us grew up old enough that, I spent hours and hours and hours. I was the darkroom head for my yearbook, and so I developed all of the photos. I wasn't one of I was a little bit of a control personality, so I didn't let anybody else for that yearbook develop any of the stuff. I developed every single image that came in. And I can still smell Dectol if I think about it, and the kind of the chocolatey smell of Dectol. And but I think that there was something about, number one, is it taking that kind of time and understanding also when Photoshop comes out, you understood there's so many terms in Photoshop, or even in our modern era, even, people don't know, it's like splines. We talk about splines. Splines were metal rods used to build ships, right. And the knots and the weights were like tied onto them and used to pull those metal splines to form the outside of the ship. So a lot of these terms are things that are very, very old, and we still are kind of bridging. But the new generation they're just a button, right?
Like rotoscoping. Nobody knows what rotoscoping is. I mean, right. I used to sit there on a downshooting camera, and you would have to put the projector in the lens and shoot down onto a table and draw your mat. You were drawing a mask right onto this platen. It was insane,
Every frame.
It was frame by frame. I mean, animation. I was early on in the animation industry, and because I had an illustration background, I would often be hired to do what are called keys, right? Yeah. And so a key illustration in animation terms is you draw an illustration about yay big, right? Mm-hmm. And you're drawing it to send it off to, usually it was Korea or somewhere, to draw a bigger illustration. But this is what the color key is supposed to look like. These were all the colors and everything was supposed to be. So I got a job working on this little show. It was a company called Klasky Supo. They were this little animation house, and it was this little animation show for the Tracy Ullman Show, and it was called The Simpsons, right? So I got to work on the first season of The Simpsons. But the process, the amount of work that would go into just a short little few seconds, right?
Yeah.
You had to do so much prep and so much experimentation just to get those few seconds on film, and you learn so many of these processes, and now everybody takes it for granted.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and as you're working today, what are the things that you're the most excited about in our industry right now?
I mean, I'm really excited about capture. So
you're out there capturing right now. You're capturing a lot of 3D objects, right?
Yes. So capture, and I don't really like to call it AI. I like to call it machine assisted, technologies. It's not for me, it's what the computer's always been good at, which is accelerating your visual feedback. So it's this feedback loop. As an artist, you always want, you put something out and you see what the result is, and you're always tweaking and refining those things. And back in the early days, you remember this, like you would render something, it would take hours, right?
Days.
Just to see an image. Remember rendering little regions of pixels where you could just change.
You know, I think that the people, like when I see people render something now, they'll turn all the things on and then render it.
Yeah.
And they'll be sitting there in the middle of the afternoon, like not doing anything. I'm like, why aren't you doing something? And they're like, well, I'm rendering. And I'm like, okay, no, this isn't like, you can't do it this way. Because we used to go back and this is a process, right? We would do all of our animation, make sure we're really happy with the animation and we turned everything off until it was sometimes wireframe so that we could see that animation going nice and smoothly. And then we did to what Erick's talking about. We render these little squares, and you'd render like a piece. For me, it was like a piece of the Queen ship. Like I would just render like a little section. Like, is this working? Is this working? And then if I know it works here, and I know it works here, and the animation, looks like it could work, I might render a test over lunch. But still like a little postage stamp of those things. Yeah. And that's come a long way, right?
Oh my God. I mean, I remember the first time I saw, I think it was, and I didn't use Lightwave, but it was in Lightwave. I think Whirly Labs had this thing, I think it was called forget what it was called, but it was the first time you had like a little postage stamp size version of your render, but it was real time updating, right?
Yeah.
You could see it iteratively. And I was like, wow, that's the future.
Well, and I remember Scott Pascoe at Electric Image wrote a radiosity renderer. And the radiosity renderer, of course, it's calculating, it's global illumination, right? So it's calculating the reflection of light off of the walls and then landing on it and how all that works. But it would take, for one radiosity render, just the calculation would be like all night. Like you turn it on and you just go away. And now it's like you watch little in Cinema 4D or whatever, you just watch little patches all, kind of appear all over the place, and then they all tie together. So you're capturing, now you're out there you're doing photogrammetry and LiDAR?
Yeah, we're doing both photogrammetry and LiDAR, and we're capturing really high res 360 degree images as well that we do panos with using medium format cameras. We're experimenting. Yeah, so right now our daily driver shooter is the R5 Canon, but we've got the Fuji medium format that I think it's the GS2, and then we're talking to the guys from Phase One and getting some phase cameras in to experiment with. These are all 100+ megapixel cameras that are intensely large, but you're also trying to get, because it's photogrammetry, it's like this delicate balance. It's not, the larger sensor doesn't mean it's automatically going to be better. You also are working with optics. So lensing is very important, looking for, things that reduce any sort of optical diffraction on the edges and have very clear optics. That's something that's very important to us as well. So we're really in a big R&D period right now.
Right.
To get as much, when we're out at a site, we want to capture as much as we can, just as much as we can, as fast as we can, and future-proof that data set for later on.
Yeah, I think that's the tricky thing. When people say, well, I don't want to spend a lot of money on something, but I want to go out and shoot. I'm like, well, time is valuable. Time is like, when are you like, and again, and a good example is, I shot you've seen a little bit of my experimentations in Angkor Wat, and, I shot some of this stuff there, and I just had the camera that I had with me, which was like a 24 megapixel, old Canon that I shot with. Man, I wish I had shot that with a Sony, with 60 megapixels,
oh, yeah.
Or with, with something that had a lot more, headroom to it. Now I got a lot of data out of it anyway, but I guess I could have been walking around Angkor Wat, but I was shooting like crazy. And the hard part is also, I'm sure that you run into, is that you're dealing with people. Like you're in a public space, and so
oh, yeah.
And so you're like, how do you got to find the times that you can grab that.
It's funny, the Leicas are really good. These little things, and thank you for turning me on to Leica Geosystems. It's been incredible. They have interesting features. So this particular camera up here it'll do 2 scans, and then it'll look for things that are moving because it knows points that are there from the previous scan, and it will isolate those points for you. So when you go to clean the data, you actually it's smart about it to a degree. You still have to go in there and futz around with it, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and how are you doing much where you're mixing the photogram, the structured light and the unstructured light? So you're taking you have the LiDAR, which is the structured light, and then you have the unstructured photographs. How are you kind of combining those two together?
Well, we're doing it in 3 ways. So we take the point cloud data that we get from the scans. We go in and do just a ton of photogrammetry on the scene. So if we're in a room, we'll just shoot the heck out of it from as many angles as we can possibly get. And then we'll go into the details, to the surfaces, and we have a rig that is cross-polarized. So we'll use cross-polarized light where we
Can you explain cross-polarized?
Yeah. So the light source and the lens have polarization filters on them. And what we're doing is, the best way to describe it is whatever ambient lighting that exists, our exposure is well below that. So we're dropping down to the floor. We're like, ISO 100. We're trying to get no ambient light. And then we have very bright flashes. And the 2 flashes sit on the side of the camera in between the lens, and they have a polarization filter on it. And the lens also has a polarization filter on it in the opposite direction. And so what that does is it gives you a ambient light that doesn't have any reflectance values at all. So you're not getting sheen or reflection on surfaces. So you're just getting the pure color of the surface. It's bizarre when you look at the photography, when you look at cross-polarized photography, it looks a little strange, but what it does give you is it gives you the color characteristics of the surface, and it allows you to extract that and create texture maps. And then when you put all that data together, you have very dense point cloud that you get. You then take, and photogrammetry is essentially you're taking a bunch of different photographs. You're estimating the camera positions of those photographs in the computer, and then generating a sparse point cloud of those camera positions. And then when you merge all that data together, you get some pretty fantastic looking stuff. And it's, again, we're still in the early stages of our pipeline, but the initial proof of concept stuff is incredible. But again, we have to capture stuff at just mind-boggling amounts of data. It's terabytes per location.
I have one that I shot. I have this one scene in from India that I shot. I found a block, like a city block that was inside of a city block in India, in the spice district in old Delhi. And so I shot it. I just went around and shot 100 and some photos, and 190 photos or whatever, and pretty organized. So we do a lot of photogrammetry, and to this day I can still send it to most people if you turn everything all the way up. And there's a couple of PCs now, and I think the new Mac will survive it. But up until like a year ago, I shot this 6 years ago. Up until about a year ago, if you turned the dials in Metashape all the way up, it would just crash. It would go for 3 days, and then it would just, on a PC or Mac, and it would just heat the CPU up to a point where it just went, I'm just going to restart. I can't do that anymore. But what's incredible about photogrammetry is we get down to some of the stuff in Angkor Wat. I got the texture of the stone. It's only limited by the resolution of your camera. I remember talking to Greg Downing about this, and I talked to Greg Downing about this 15 years ago, and he was just like, well, photogrammetry is going to take over because he said, because we can do LiDAR and we can do all these other things, but you're going to get down to the point where you're only limited by the resolution of the camera. The problem is that it's keeping all of that on the skeleton of the LiDAR. The LiDAR gives you scale, it gives you position, it gives you, it gives you structure, so that because the problem is that the photogrammetry, right, can warp out of phase, especially as you do multiple captures. It becomes harder to keep structured, right?
Yeah, that's the thing is that the photogrammetry is really detailed, as you said, but it does, unless you really test your lenses and you figure out how to unwarp your lenses correctly, and you do the proper testing and you feed that data into the photogrammetry software, it's doing its best guess at all this stuff. Right. And it's complex math, a lot of trigonometry, figuring out what point correlates with another point. But the great thing is when you marry the two things together, when you take LiDAR and photogrammetry and put them together, now photogrammetry gets a lot better.
Yep.
Because it knows where these points are supposed to be. LiDAR is really accurate. It's like hyper accurate. They use it for, construction measurements and all kinds of other fields where you have to have accurate measurement. So you're taking accurate measurement and merging it together, and now all of a sudden, it's the estimations that it has to do is a lot more accurate, and therefore the results are a lot more accurate.
Now, where do NERFs fit into all of this?
It's an interesting question. So NERF, now it's Gaussian splats. Right?
I know exactly.
It's evolving so quickly.
They thought NERF was too soft.
It's
a Gaussian splat now. Yeah,
exactly. It's a splat. So this is really interesting because a lot of the higher end environments, we just came back from a trip, and we were capturing a giant location for a television show, and the problem with large scale, as you know, is it's really hard to build large scale stuff in a real time environment and get it to run in real time. And they needed this to run on some walls. So we had done some experimental NERF photography while we were there, which is similar to photogrammetry. A little bit, you're shooting it a little bit differently, but we ended up getting a scene running, and it looked pretty good. We used the Luma AI tools inside of Unreal Engine. And we got some pretty compelling results. I don't think it's ready for prime time just yet, but it's getting really good. And then the thing about Gaussian splats is it takes a little one step further. It's just like a giant dense particle system of cards looking at the camera, and the cards have these Gaussian dots on them, and it stacks them up in a way that really looks really good and looks like very close to a photograph. And then you can move inside and around a radiance field, and you really get a sense of depth, and things like reflections behave the right way, things like lighting behaves the right way. So it's very close to being like a production ready technology. And I think that the data sets that we're capturing will fit into that. I'm experimenting right now with how can I take the Gaussian splat database that you would normally use, the photography that you would normally use for it, and marry it with what I'm getting off of the Leica, because then you can marry this high intensity point cloud data with this photography that you've taken, and hopefully that's going to help the Gaussian splatting be a little bit better, or the NERF be a little bit better.
And in some ways, a lot of this stuff's been floating around for a long time. I can't remember what the technology was, but Microsoft was working on this, I don't know, solid 15, 20 years ago. They had this, they had a team internally, and I just can't think of the name of the team. Bill Crow, I know, ran it, and I just can't think of the name of what they were putting together, but it was basically taking, building these 3D models of where photos needed to be, and then putting the, attaching the photos to it.
Yeah, they were using the internet. So they were using everybody's photography.
Yeah.
And I remember it. And they would actually go and sample, like if you were, I remember them showing Fisherman's Wharf, right? And it was like, here's all the pictures anybody's ever posted online on Fisherman's Wharf. And now let's use that as a data set.
Yeah. And if you shot your own data set, like I shot one, I was in a helicopter in Rio and shot Christ the Redeemer, and I shot hundreds of photos, and then you just push it into Microsoft system. But the funny thing was, they got so frustrated with me because I was like, I just want the point cloud. Like I was trying to get the point cloud back out so that I could go back to my old ways, and they were like, but it's a beautiful image of like this all works, and I'm like, yeah, I don't need that. I just need and so I had figured out a way to hack like as it loaded up the page, I figured out a way to. There's like this little thing you could put in your web page that you could hack it out.
Oh, like Wireshark or one of those.
Yeah. You were just like it would just rip out the center of every photo, so that I could get it back. But so a lot of us have thought about this for a long time, but it sometimes it just takes the technology, it takes the hardware, right? In some cases, this is just the ability for these graphics cards to even manage this, right? I mean, that's it. We're kind of waiting for that.
Oh yeah, I mean, we're having to order. I just put my order in for a bunch of the Mac cheese graters, fully loaded, like as stocked as they can possibly get. Yeah. And we're hoping that we can get, some other graphics cards, and we're testing everything like AMD, NVIDIA, like whatever. PC, Mac, it doesn't matter. Linux, whatever we can get to compute these things as fast as we can, because Metashape, interestingly enough, and in my testing, Metashape on the Mac, especially with the new generation of hardware on the Mac, is pretty compelling.
Yeah.
Just because the difference is, like on the Windows, when you buy a graphics card, you're locked into that memory on the graphics card, right? Your GPU memory is locked into your card. The Mac architecture actually shares the memory of the computer with the graphics architecture.
Right.
And that's a game changer for this type of compute.
Yeah, because that was one of the big things that I got excited about, was that one of the big problems that we run into with the calculations is that we just run out of RAM. You just keep on running out of RAM, and so when you have, it just can't hold everything, and it has to hold all of it in one place to figure out where everything belongs. And so it's really, really interesting. Now, as you capture all of these things, where do you see us going in the next, 5 years or 10 years? Like where do you see this process moving towards?
Well, eventually, screens are just gonna get bigger and become everywhere as technology makes everything cheaper. We're gonna have screens. I mean, it's already started. Like we're already in Blade Runner. It's already happening. You go to the mall, things are popping out. This is already, Minority Report's already here. So as screen technology gets cheaper, as these Apple Vision Pro and all these other things are coming, as these things are getting more robust, the need to be in a realistic environment, the need to be able to transform yourself into an immersive location, we believe is going to be really important. And there's things from historical preservation. I mean, look at the story about the Assassin's Creed video game that they scanned Notre Dame, and luckily they did, because they were able to use it in the restoration of Notre Dame when it burned down. I mean, there's all kinds of compelling reasons for capture. Right.
Yeah, I think that's true. Like that was the scan, right? A video game basically gave them the data that they needed to rebuild Notre Dame, because they didn't have that data otherwise, right?
Right. I mean, they could only look at photographs. They couldn't see it dimensionally.
Yeah, and I do think that now, as these tools have gotten a lot easier to use, just beyond any of the entertainment value or educational value, just preservation of just knowing what it looked like at this moment has become really important. Now, are you bullish on the VR stuff?
I kind of am, but in a different way. I mean, VR has always been, I've been interested in VR since, the 90s, believe it or not. And immersing yourself into something, we do it all the time. We do it in our screens. We do it, I just think that technology is going to get to the point where it's going to be more of a common use case. When Google Glass came out, nobody, it didn't bite, but it needed to happen in order for Oculus to get developed. And that bit a little bit, and that needed to happen in order for, Apple Vision Pro to come to, once we start using these tools and they become commonplace, and it's not just a niche market, I think the world of immersive video is only going to grow, and it's going to grow in different ways. We're going to have rooms eventually in our house where the whole room is just an immersive experience.
It's empty. Like you can walk around. We had we had the luxury of having a 36 camera motion capture system in our office, and we were doing VR. And this was probably 2016, 2017, and we were doing a bunch of VR work already for Nokia and Meta and stuff like that, or Facebook at the time, Oculus. And we built a system where we had, outside in tracking, and we just put your headset on, and we built a museum. We built a museum that you could walk around in, and we took a bunch of little carvings from Africa that I had brought back, Shona carvings, but made them 3 feet high and 8 feet high and put them on stands and everything else. And you could walk around, and look at them. And when we did it at the time, we were like, this is the future. Like, why have it looked and felt so real that now the technology, the problem was there was $250,000 of hardware going around the outside edge that needed to be sorted out because it was outside in instead of inside out. But when it's tracked properly, when you can walk around, and then we started to play with it, but adding all the annotations, everything else, it's just the raw, and especially if you look at today's real estate market, there's the possibility of having just raw spaces that you can just, have as a virtual museum. It's pretty interesting.
Oh, no. And I was one of the few people that got a chance to visit the Void. I don't know if you remember the Void. Before because Cliff was the CEO of the Void, and I remember Cliff back from the Matador Parallax days, right?
Cliff hired me at ILM.
I know.
Under duress, but anyway.
Yeah, I did. I used to demo Parallax for him and Matador for him back in the day, which was it was this original paint program that would run on the SGI, and it was one of the first tools that you could actually do significant roto with.
And that's a really great. I feel like Matador is a really good a good show of disruption, like how disruption works. Because you had Matador, and then ILM built CompTime, which is was their own version of Matador in a lot of ways of doing roto. And then a visual effects supervisor at ILM, Scott, basically commotion. He did well. He had this thing called Flipbook, and so we would the only way we could play back video for review was to throw it into Flipbook, and what it would do is it would load all of your frames into RAM, so it would play them out in full time. And that's the only way you could see a fully rendered piece. And then they started painting on it, and it was commotion, and this little Mac app just blew through everything, right? I mean, it was so much faster.
I was a flame artist at the time, and I was working on the flame, and I remember this job came in, and it was so large that we couldn't scale, we couldn't just get enough flames to do the work. And because it was a lot of paint out and restoration work and all this other stuff. And so I ended up calling up Forrest. I'm like, hey, Forrest Key, right? He was the Commotion. I'm like, Forrest, I need 60 copies of Commotion tomorrow. He's like, all right, I'll ship them over. And it was crazy how quickly, and it was so easy to use, and it was so simple, and it was just, you just needed a Mac. And those at that time, they were selling those Scully Macs. Remember, it was like anybody could buy them. It was like Apple had this weird time period where this moment where they were licensing other people to build hardware.
Power Mac or whatever was it?
Power Macs, right?
Power computing.
That's right. Yeah. Right. And you could buy these, you could buy. It was like, do we spend $1 million on an Onyx and a couple $100,000 on, or do we just buy 50 Macs and 50 copies of Commotion and just get a crew working on it? And it was cheaper to do the 50.
And a lot of those technologies will come and go. And sometimes it's just a function of the team understanding. Like Commotion, the reason it worked was because Scott Squires obviously came out of visual effects. Yeah. And Forrest he's a really smart guy.
Really smart.
He's like one of the smartest people. I usually feel like I'm doing okay in a room, and
do you remember Forrest when he came out with, he had this I'm going to explain to you a DVD about, he explained visual effects and encoding and all this stuff. And it just made me feel so stupid.
I know. Yeah, exactly. It was so,
he really knows this really well.
Yeah. The funny thing is that, like there are things that, software that companies can miss. So that technology, sometimes a lot of the technology depends on people like us to figure out how to make it work. Like for instance, Motion was able to do some of the basic things that a Flame could do in 2008, but the team, that people didn't think of it that way. They thought of it as motion graphics. I was like, I did 105 green screen shots in 3 weeks, with Motion on a Mac, looping in real time while we were pulling the green screens because it could do it. But then it just disappeared. Like it just, we moved on and there was not enough.
Don't get me started about Shake. Don't get me started about. Man.
Yeah. But a lot of times the industry, what I think is interesting is that it has to be the right people at the right time, and they have to be able to work through it. It's not just the technology is ready to go. It's not those things. It has to, all those ingredients have to come together at one time. We've got some
100%.
questions.
I mean,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, what was incredible about going back to that John Knoll showing us the Mission Impossible helicopter. I mean, what was incredible about that was he did it on Electric Image on his Mac.
Yeah.
And the quality was just as good as what was coming out is sometimes better than what was coming out of CGM at ILM at the time. And CGM was this giant, there it is. He's got the box.
There it is. There's the box. He's got the box.
Oh my God, that's great. Yeah. I mean, it's like, because it was the Holy Grail. And at that point it dawned on all of us, it's not just the tools, it's the methodology and the people. Like that's what's important. You can do this stuff.
John proves that. This is not going to become a John Knoll show. And we talk, anytime you start talking about with people at visual effects shows, you have a bad habit of talking about John Knoll too much.
Got to go back to John. You got it.
But he's like the OG, and so but like that. Yeah. Again, that I don't know where the visual effects industry would be if he hadn't shown that airplane. It was and it's a throwaway shot in the movie. So the airplane at the end in the clouds, just the exterior shot,
amazing.
And it just no one thought of it as a CG shot, and it was a throwaway shot. Like it's literally on air for. If you go to the end of the original Mission Impossible, there is a 737 in the sky. It is not a shot that you would ever think about, but he showed us how he rendered it in passes. And it literally, the idea, we would render objects in passes, but we never thought of rendering surfaces in passes.
Nope.
And then you can adjust all the surfaces in After Effects. You could go in there and just adjust the opacities and how they go. And now you could do something in real time that you couldn't. And, now it's built into like all the, every piece of software and everything else. But for a long time, Electric Image was the only one that did that because John had asked for it, and so we were the only ones that could do it in the 90s. And then Cinema 4D started getting a little bit and Cinema 4Ds now is very complex, like what they can do. Yeah. And Maya finally kind of like hacked it in. It was some kind of, Maya's was a mess for a long time. But there was this change in the way that everybody thought. They went from, it just kind of slowly bled out into the world of this is the way to do that thing. And now we're back to not doing that. You're doing it in real time, but it was really an interesting moment. We got some questions. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, just a comment on that is it goes back to that feedback loop. Like he was figuring out how to hack a way for him to be able to adjust things without having to re-render and re-render and re-render.
Well, and bringing old stuff in. Like he was basically doing what you do with a motion control camera.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. Next question.
Eric, our first question comes to us from Jack Ruppel in Breckenridge, Colorado. Can you discuss Timecode, 2000 film editing and sound design, and how this technique may be used in 2023 and beyond?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that was a weird experimental movie. And it's interesting because the whole movie played out in quadrants. So the whole movie was split. So you had 4 simultaneous stories going concurrently. And when we got it, I was working at a post company that worked on it after the editing and the sound design was kind of complete. So my experience on that movie was mostly in the finishing side. However, I did get to work with the editors and the people who were making the movie. And what was interesting about it is that they had done 4 different edits, right? So 4 completely different cuts that they would then, the 4 editing teams would come together and look at their cuts together and figure out how the stories intersected and they would work out where the story intersections were, and then it all played out kind of simultaneously. So it was a really different kind of experimental, film. When we got it, it was, of course, it's four movies in one, trying to piece it all together and get it all to sort of be cohesive color-wise and all the other stuff.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, with the increase in processing power in mobile devices and on the desktop, what changes can you see in the creative landscape?
Oh, wow, that's a good one. There's lots of changes in the creative landscape, especially with mobile devices. I'm using mobile devices right now with the Leica scanners, and some of the things that you can do on the mobile apps in real time are very, very much equivalent to what you're doing on desktop things that take equal amounts of time. And in some cases, what I can do on an iPad with this scanner is faster than the desktop version. So I think eventually, as these mobile processors start to get faster and faster, you're going to see a lot of compute power in a very small location.
Yeah, and it's one thing to bring the scanner in, but oftentimes, I'll be sitting there looking at, we were looking at new spaces, and I'm trying to send something to somebody to like, hey, take a look at the space. And the fact that I can open up Polycam and just wander around and wave my camera around and get a 3D model, and then 10 minutes after I got there, I can send a 3D model that someone can hit on the you can tap it on your messages and it will pop up at full res. Like if you walk outside into a parking lot, you're walking through the space, in your phone. I find that to be amazing.
It's amazing. The USDZ standard, USD and the zip version that they're going to have. I mean, all this stuff, it's going to be a convergence very soon. There's so much that you can do so quickly. Polycam is a great little app. I mean, I use it all the time. There's another one called Dot that does, LiDAR. There's so many incredible things you can do on a mobile device that you just would never have thought that's where we're at today. It's magic. Yeah. It really is.
Next question.
Next one coming in from Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada. I've got some old FLC animation. Any suggestion from converting them to MP4 or movies?
Pretty basic, pretty straightforward question.
Yeah. I think you could start with the media. Adobe, media encoder would probably be able to handle that.
Yeah, we'll go to the next question.
Next question from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. What are some of the most challenging and rewarding projects that you've worked on as a visual effects supervisor and producer?
Oh, wow. There's several come to mind. I mean, a lot. Lately, I worked on a show called Echo 3. It was on Apple Plus. Really challenging because the director wasn't a visual effects guy. He was like, I'm going to get a real chopper. I'm going to go to the, out in the middle of the Sahara. I'm going to go out in the middle of the jungle. He hated visual effects. And that was a challenge. It was a really interesting challenge.
Now, sometimes that's a challenge and an advantage. I don't know. I mean, like, is it that he's...
It's a disadvantage because you're going in with a deck stacked against you, right? And so it's a challenge. But at the same time, it makes you sort of rethink the sensibilities about how you're going to approach certain shots. So, like for muzzle flashes, I went out and shot some muzzle flashes, like real muzzle flashes against black at various angles for the guns that he wanted these to be associated with. And he was very meticulous about, he had done the Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30, very, very into reality and making sure that the story is very authentic because he was a journalist, right? So that was a good challenge. And it made me sort of rethink the approach to visual effects. It was really a tough time because there was a lot of visual effects happening. And so there wasn't a lot of capacity, which was refreshing, right? Because it was like almost like a boom time for visual effects. And it it was great because a shot that would normally, run a certain amount of money was like 3 times the amount to go anywhere because it was supply and demand. But we also did some de-aging stuff there. It was very subtle. And I worked with the guys at Lola Effects, really spectacucular work.
I'm always amazed. Lola was hidden for like a decade. It was just like no one, there was no, we drove by, I can't remember where it is in LA, but I saw like a Lola sign on the side of a building.
In Santa Monica. Yeah.
I was like, because I remember when that building, the building was there and you'd go in and it was like, you thought you were working at like Kerner Optical. There was nothing. No one wanted to talk about the fact that all these people were getting de-aged for the movies. And then it became a thing. It's interesting. Yeah. One of the things that I was talking to someone about the fact that doing some, we've gotten into this thing of we're like a spaceship. We're going to do a spaceship, and it's going to be CG and it's going to be whatever. And the fact that doing some of it practically in the shots that you would not all the shots, but if you did some of them practically, what it did is it showed up where we weren't lifting as hard as we could, on the CG ship. And that's what people complain about. They feel like it's not real. It doesn't really feel real. But it having to intercut with a physical version of the same thing forced all the CG to be better. Yeah.
I mean, that was the tough part. I mean, we had to do one of the problems that we ran into in this, the whole opening scene into the first act of the first episode. There's like this fight that happens in a snowstorm, and they had to shoot it when it wasn't a snowstorm. So there's snow on the ground somewhat, but we had to put in all this blowing snow, and it was really tough because, as you know, like atmospheric effects and stuff can be incredibly difficult. And I remember just going outside, throwing up some I think it was laundry detergent or something, and getting some slow-mo stuff of that and blowing some stuff in the air and using those elements to put on top of the CG elements just to give it a sense of reality. And it really helped us a lot, just those practical things.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we used to do for camera shake is we would take a camera and zoom in on a sheet of paper with some tracking markers, and we just hold it on that tracking marker. And one of the things we learned was your heartbeat, your breath, the mechanics of your arms, and if you did it long enough, how tired your arms got. It created something that you couldn't. It was very hard to animate. And even today, I can tell you, I can look at most camera shake and go, "Oh, they made that up." Like they did. They didn't. That's not. They added that because it just has this little CG 2D kind of thing. It's hard to bring that organic. I guess the organicness of the world is still hard to simulate, whether it's geometry or movement.
Yeah, and I always go like everybody that says, "Hey, I want to learn CG. What's the one piece of advice you can give me?" I'm like, learn what this thing is.
Yeah.
Pick one up. They're cheap these days. Learn what an f-stop is, aperture, learn about lensing and lighting. The more you do of this, the better you will be at that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it. It's like reality is reality. References. Go back to your references.
No, absolutely. Next question.
Respect to Wiggler. Next question coming in from Douglas Carmichael. Have you ever worked with Blender or other open source tools? How would you compare them with commercial tools you grew up with?
Blender is a sleeping giant. This thing is an incredible piece of software. I mean, I am not an expert in it, but I dabble, and I can say that it is definitely coming of age. It's taken a long time, and the menu still is a little hard to sort of, there's some things that are counterintuitive. I like software to be really intuitive. I like to not to have to open a manual. I like to be able to just know where it's going to be, And I come from the day where we had weird software like this program called Bryce, which just had this very strange interface, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And it was cool. You could figure, and you could do. It was almost like playing an instrument, Bryce. It was like, oh, we're going to try, some of this stuff. But if you're going to build a menu system, you should make it as intuitive as possible. And there's still some counterintuitive things inside of Blender that still need to get rooted out. But the tool as a whole, open source tool, it's incredible. It does so many fantastic things.
Next question.
From Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada. How do you feel about the emerging gestural interface with our computers brought forward by AR, VR, XR as it might affect your art focus, sculpting in VR?
Yeah, I think gestures are going to be different. And I would say this, everybody's going to have to wait until they see the Vision Pro and how interesting it is to just do this and not have to go crazy. Because, we all thought we wanted the Power Glove, for Nintendo. And then it came out and we're like, wow, this is not really cool at all. It doesn't work. Going back to this, right?
I mean, and we've been playing with those gloves. I mean, I was at SGI and we were visiting SGI like 25 years ago, and they had the gloves. And they had the room, and they had this huge umbilical cord that came down from the ceiling and would hook into your head, this helmet, and you could build things and move things around and model it. And you thought that it was going to be out next year, and it's still taken us a long time to figure this out. To get it, down below $10 million a copy.
But also, I think at a certain point, you just don't like it. It's like it depends on how you're going to be engaged. Like I feel like, when you're playing a video game, it's a type of engagement. When you're watching YouTube, it's a different type of engagement. It depends, I would rather just be out there somewhere doing something if I'm going to be active, I want to be active out in the world. So I think finding the ways, because there's some certain things like have you done any of those like exercise games on the Meta Quest?
Yeah, it's called Robo Recall. Just do every level without a gun.
Unbelievably cool.
It's really, really good.
That
exercise.
Is really cool. You look down and you see your arms and you're like,
yeah, exactly.
That is the coolest thing in the world. That's cool.
Yeah.
But I don't know, some like the Kinect, it wasn't so cool, right. Trying to jump around to move something a couple pixels to the right. It wasn't so cool.
I needed to be contextual. So Robo Recall was great for me. And I would I think that it got to a point where I didn't really share my Oculus that much because it was kind of gross because I was sweating a lot because I do it every day. I'd play a half an hour Robo Recall and that was like my little exercise for the afternoon, get my brain going again. Next question.
I'm going to show my age with this question for me. I go back to COSA and the render then sleep process. How does today's rendering speed affect your workflow, Eric?
Wow, COSA, taking me back too. I don't know if you know this, Alex, but I wrote the original Lightning plugin with a friend of mine that shipped in the original version of After Effects.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's good. I used it.
It was one of the original, and I did it. So there was a guy named Chris Cassidy. He was a rotoscope artist, and he worked on the original Star Wars. And Chris helped us develop that tool set that got us that original. And we showed it to Dave H and Dave T. And the first thing they were like, how did you get the SDK? I'm like,
yeah, exactly.
Friend of a friend on a CD, and they're like, this is really cool. We want to ship it with the product. We're like, this is awesome.
Yeah, I worked really closely with Blair to do the lightning that happened in Electric Image, and it was built so that we had him do it for the pod racers, for the engines, but I couldn't tell him what they were pod racers, so I was always like, you got two ships and they're held together with lightning and these two sailboats, and then the sailboats have ropes. He had to do a rope one as well. And anyway, so and as soon as he saw the trailer for Star Wars, I got this big email going, sailboats, I understand now.
Oh, I know.
So anyway, next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana. What was the subtlest visual effect you've added to a project that had the most impact?
Probably, we go back to this, excuse me, we go back to this Lola age stuff. We did some other subtle things that made incredible differences. I learned a lot from those guys. Edson and the guys over at Lola are very brilliant. And they taught me some things that I didn't really know. It's like, as you age, two things grow, which is your ears and your nose. And a lot of the work they do is in putting the ears and the nose back together and they know this is like, you want to go 10 years back, you want to go 15 years back, you want to go, and they've got all these different tool sets. So it's really about subtlety.
Yeah.
And what they do is a lot of subtlety. And I've noticed that the subtler approach, the softer the approach, can make some incredible differences. But that's the one that comes to mind if I have to think about it.
Next question.
Josh Kaufman from Pittsburgh, PA. How do you balance your creative vision with the expectations and requirements of the directors, producers, and clients that you work with?
It's a juggling act for sure. So to figure it out, you've got time, you've got money, right? And those are kind of connected, and you've got your goals, as an artist that you're trying to help them achieve their vision. If they're very collaborative, it can be very rewarding and cool. And you figure out, you'll sacrifice your own time just to make it cooler. If they're not very collaborative, it can be really difficult. If they don't know what they want, it can be difficult. So I kind of find I try to, if I haven't worked with somebody before, I try to figure out where are they on that spectrum. Do they know what they want? Do they want you to show them something new? Are they, and you try to guide them early on with lookdev and do as much prep as you can. And then based on that, sort of what approaches you're going to take. Sometimes you can be a little bit more experimental and a little bit more creative. And sometimes you have to rein that in, and you have to be more pragmatic and really do things a little bit differently. So it really depends on the client and it depends on the project, how you're going to approach it.
Next question.
Brody Hefner from New York City. When museums present detailed digital 3D models of collection objects, they hit constraints based on the number of polygons composing the object. What new software tools are able to efficiently display objects with many millions of polygons?
Well, I mean, there's always the tools like, ZBrush that are really good at polygons. I remember Alex back in the day showed us this what was that sculpt program?
Oh, it was Electric Image had it. It was it was
Sculpty or Sculpt. I don't remember. It was.
Yeah, I can't remember. It was like their ZBrushy kind of, because it was beyond ZBrush, because ZBrush was like this 2.5D, and we were like, what if we just rotate something around and model it? And I actually modeled in the 90s, I modeled, I can't think of the name of it right now, but I modeled Titan AE, all of the crystals. So all of those crystals that are in Titan AE, I modeled in that. Morphium.
That's right. When you first showed me that, it was like, whoa, that's magic. And ZBrush was kind of the same way. It was like, oh, this is magical. It's got this. But there are, I think, the thing is compute power keeps going. AI is interesting because the machine learning algorithms inside of the chips today are getting really smart at display, right? So they're working really hard to like optimize display and allow us to throw more and more and more at it. But I can still break a computer with polygons, believe me.
Oh yeah.
To this day, I absolutely can bring a computer to its knees with some of the data sets.
Although, I think that the phones have become amazing. I remember I had a budget of about, this is when we get old, I had a budget for an entire game level of about 3,000 polygons. I could put 3,000 polygons in, and this is in the mid 90s. And now I have, and that was a lot at the time to do that. And all the textures were 128 by 128, or it wouldn't play back right. I had a couple that were 256. I'd sneak in, and now we're talking about 50 meg files with 2 million polygons, and that's the limit right now on the phone. And it's a theoretical. I mean, it could go higher. Apple just somehow is putting a limit on that right now, but it just opens up and seamlessly plays. Like it's an amazing Amazing thing. A lot of it has to do with decimation. Good decimation and normal mapping is really the key to the operation. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking, the Autodesk software suites, among other big-name software suites, are now running on Apple Silicon Macs. Do you think that changes the game for lower-level artists to have such performance easily accessible?
I don't think 3ds Max is still running. Will never run on a Mac.
No, it's
ever. It's
too much DirectX.
It's too much DirectX. Yeah, I mean that was the tool that I used for many years. Still use it to this day, and not because of any other reason that other than as a DCC, it fits really well with Unreal Engine.
Can you define what DCC?
Oh yeah, so it's like a dynamic content creation tool. So like when you're using Maya, 3D Studio Max, Blender, Cinema 4D, these are all like the DCCs. You're dynamically creating content with them. And then you're publishing them off to different places. And the places may be Unreal Engine, they may be a web browser. It depends on where you're going. It may be a video or a movie. So your 3D daily driver, the thing that you use mostly is that tool set, if it's Blender or if it's Cinema or if it's, in my case, it's 3D Studio Max because I've used it for so long. And I went from electric image to, I've used it all. I've used, Alias, Wavefront, turned into Maya and all this other stuff. But I ended up in 3D Studio Max because I was primarily doing a lot of architectural things that would then go into video games. And that worked really well because Unreal Engine and 3D Studio Max share the same world space. So they share the same units and the same world space, and things go back and forth very, very easily. So that's how I sort of got set in my ways on 3D Studio Max.
Last question for the hour.
Last one from Douglas Carmichael. Define lookdev.
Oh, so lookdev is when you're developing how something is going to appear. So you're doing a test to see how shiny do I want this helmet to be? How gold do I want it to be? And you explore. And this is when you're sort of exploring the creative process of exploring. And normally you're doing it for like a director or somebody who is commissioning you to come up with, what is this going to be? And you try different things. You're like, okay, well, let's throw a gold cape on, or let's put him in an iron suit, or so you try a bunch of different things, and then it's a series of refinement where the look dev then gets tighter and tighter, and you get closer and closer to what the final product is going to look like. But it's an exploratory phase where as an artist, you're going through and trying different things and seeing what works.
Erick, thank you so much for coming and joining us for the hour.
You bet. Thanks, Alex.
It's good to have you. And thank you to the panelists for all the great conversation here. We can't do this without you. We also can't do it without all the producers that are out there asking all these questions. It's a really short show or a fairly short show without the producers asking questions, and we really appreciate all of your input. Thanks to the incredible team that develops the software that actually makes this show actually happen. As you may guess, it's not just a Zoom call. And so the folks that make all of this happen, thank you for developing the hardware, the software development tools that required. There's people here cutting the show 7 days a week, around year round, that make this actually happen. And there's an incredible team managing it, making sure everybody's ready and making sure that we know what we're going to do for the second hour. We appreciate all of your contribution. We traveled in the Tlaloc Traversal answering all these questions. We traveled 67,000 miles. That's 107,000 kilometers. And that's 530 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours.
And don't forget, if you're interested in joining us for our show workshop, it's today at 12 Pacific, 3 Eastern. We'll show you everything there is to know about office hours. Thanks for being here, Erick.
You got it.
That was great.
Thanks, Erick.
Are you home for a little while?
Yes. Yeah, we're here for a bit, which is good. we get to I think our next month. And I think the 12th, I'm heading to Australia. That'll be the next trip.
In November?
November, yeah.
Oh, very good. Are you going to Melbourne or Sydney or both? Or
Going to Sydney, going to Melbourne, and then there's a couple other places. I haven't even gotten a chance to look at the itinerary yet.
Nice. Sounds great. All right. See you later.
Bye, guys.